Kristal, Markle-Tem, thank you for joining Lessons from Learning Leaders today. I appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here.
So we're looking at starting these the same way we always do. I'm looking at the LinkedIn page. The LinkedIn does not tell the full story, though, so please, for everyone who doesn't know you, tell us your story.
Sure. So the story is a long one. I have been a learning leader, if you will, for about 25 years. And my beginnings were actually in government, where I was responsible for the learning of 16,000 employees at a government agency. And what was happening was I was walking around the agency and learning that we had some of the most incredible people, the best accountants, the best lawyers, the best social workers, but not the best leaders. They were excellent at their craft, but whenever they were put in, they had responsibility for others. They weren't doing the best job at that. And I decided to create a program that could build leaders. And we have lots of programs that build supervisors and give skills that are specific. But leadership is about character. It's about who you are in the dark. It's about the way that you live. So building a training based on that was going to be a whole different animal. So I started reading all the books and doing all the things, and I found the concept of servant leadership. And I believed that that was going to be the thing that would change the world, at least my world. And I started reaching out to a man named Jim Hunter, who I consider one of the fathers of modern day servant leadership. He wrote The Servant and the World's Greatest Leadership Principle, and he became my mentor. And I created this program that is still used across at least the Mid-Atlantic region for government agency supervisors and managers to this day. And it became my life's work to help people to learn how they could have an impact and create a culture and a leadership model that other people want to follow because they choose it, not because they have to.
I'm 99% sure that I have the servant over there on the wall.
You do?
I would guarantee. What was the last name?
Jim Hunter.
It's behind the giant calendar. I guarantee it.
No way.
If I get a chance,
Mine's right there. You
if I
can't
get a
see
chance
it, but
while you're answering, maybe I'll walk back there, see if I can find it. I still want to hear the answer, though. That's the problem. I'm caught between two worlds here.
I get
But
that.
so that's interesting that you were able to reach out to him, because a lot of people will read a book, they'll love it, they'll want to talk to the author, but they think it can't be done. Can you talk about how you were able to catch this guy's ear?
That's a really fun question, actually. It was probably close to 20 years ago. Not quite, but close. 15 anyway. And it was funny. I read his book and I was like, this will change everything. This is the book that will have an impact that people will never forget. Because that's what I really wanted. I didn't want something that would check a box. I wanted something that would change the way we function, the way we parent, the way we are friends, the way we love one another, not just the way we work. And I was like, wow, this is the thing. And it was Jim Hunter. And I thought, I don't know this guy. But I looked him up, and it sounds awful to say, but I saw he was still alive. And
Yeah.
if he wrote this book, it seemed to me that it was his mission to make a difference in the world and to lead well. And I needed his help, and he needed to care about that if he really was who he said he was. So I started writing him every week. Every week I would write him, and sometimes I would call him. To say I'm a little persistent is probably a bit of an understatement, but I just didn't give up. I needed him. I knew that I couldn't do it without him. One day, I was sitting at my desk in my cubicle in the back corner. I still remember it like it was yesterday. My phone rang, and it was a very odd number. I picked it up, and I heard, "Is this Kristal?" And I said, "Yes, it is, sir." "Who is this?" He said, "This is Jim Hunter." I said, "No, it's not." And he was like, "No, it really is." And I was like, "Stop it. That's not funny. This is not Jim Hunter." He was like, "No, it is. It is Jim Hunter. How can I help you?" And he literally spent the next hour listening to me say, like, "Here's how I need you. I need to know how to create leaders that other people want to follow, and it needs to be permanent. I need to create a culture that will change the way that people live, that they want to come to work, that they go home and they're better moms and better friends and better dads and better partners. Like that's what I need." And he was like, "I want to be a part of that." I was like, "What? Really? Really?" And he was like, "Yes, I do." He came to Pennsylvania. He came every year. He gave me access and taught me some of his curriculum. He spoke to my people and he mentored me for close to a decade, selflessly, gave everything he had. And it was funny because in one of my letters I wrote, "If you are who you say you are, then you will come."
You put it right out there.
Yes. And he was like, "Challenge accepted." And I was like, "All right, all right." And the really funny part is I had a boss at the time who is now my business partner and one of the most influential people in my life. And his name, I call him JP, but his name's John Phillips. And I walked up to my boss's office at the time and I was like, "You will never believe who I just got off the phone with." And he said, "Who?" And I said, "Jim Hunter." And he said, "He's dead." I said, "No, he's not. I just talked to him." And it was just a really so if you have somebody that you really want to know and was incredibly impactful for you, I mean, I too wrote a book. I've had people reach out. Hearing that what I wrote made a difference in somebody's life makes it's the most important thing to me. And if I can help it make even more of an impact, that's what I want. So for all the listeners out there, if there's an author that you just love and you know would make a difference, tell them. Tell
Yeah, and
them.
one of the most important pieces of advice I got was from a guy I knew. I got this back in like 2008, 2009. I saw this guy interviewed someone who I really just admired. And
Yeah.
I said, "How did you get an interview with them?" And he said, "Dwayne, I'm going to tell you a little secret. Okay, here's the secret to getting these interviews. Okay." And he looked, ask. And I was like, What?" He's like, "Just ask them. Just ask them. Nobody ever asks them. So when you ask, they'll more than likely say yes, or they'll say no. And what are you out? So just
Right?
ask."
It's oh my Dwayne, it is so true. And it's funny because at the time I was in my, I don't know, I was early 20s, early to mid 20s, young girl, blonde hair, lighting the world on fire in my own mind, at least. And nobody really took me seriously, especially in my trade. Most folks were male, and most of them had retired from something that they really, really loved. And for me to step up and say, "Hey, I need you. I read this. I did the work. I'm ready and I'm willing and I need your help." I've never had anybody not be excited to stand up and do that. But I mean, nobody's going to invest in you if you're not doing what it takes and not willing to ask. So I think you're right. I think it's a really important piece of advice.
I've read quite a few books on servant leadership. I try to practice that to the point where when I answer the phone, people know how I'm going to answer the phone. Because, if I look at my phone, I see it's Crystal. And I read this in a book somewhere. I don't want you to think that I came up with this, but when I read it, I was like, I'm going to do that. There's nothing new under the sun and all that. But I see it's Crystal on the phone. I answer the phone the same ways I do. My wife told me to stop doing this, but I answer and I say, "Crystal, how can I serve you?"
Oh, wow.
And I think that's better than how can I help you? Nothing against Mr. Hunter, but how can I serve you? And
Sure.
when I would talk to direct reports, I would say, "Look, I need you to tell me everything you need to know, and I don't want you or everything that you need to be successful, and I want you to understand that that's in my self-interest, not just yours. But in order for me to be successful, you have to be successful, and if there's something you need that you don't have, you need to let me know." And I think that gets back to servant leadership also. What do you say?
Oh, it absolutely does. And all of us should be measured. Our success should be measured by the success of our people. So often we get that wrong, especially whenever we're doing a lot of performance management, performance accountability. We're measuring the results of that person. That's not how it should be. It should be about how are you serving and how is your service growing that person to their greatest potential? What does that look like? I mean, hearing you say, I try to practice servant leadership, and I'm like, oh my, me too. And I fail at it every single day because it's hard. Nothing about servant leadership is easy. Our human condition teaches us to protect ourselves. That is the way that we're made from the time that we are born. And to rewire and override our brain and make the choice every day to put ourselves last and other people's interests first is not fun and it's not easy. Uh, but it's important. And it's something that if we choose, it changes, it multiplies our impact beyond anything that I think we ever really understand.
So tell me how you went from 16,000 in government to BGL.
Yeah. So my story is an interesting one. I told you I was doing leadership development programs that were year long, having a lot of success, and I started working my way out of government because other government agencies in other states and federally were looking at wanting to have this program. So I started working my way out of government. And in that process, one day I was driving to work. I was stopped at a red light and I was hit from behind by a truck at 55 miles per hour. I had a traumatic brain injury as a result, and I ended up not being able to read and write. I lost my ability to speak, which was what I did for a living. Um, I had a stutter. If I got overstimulated, I would have seizures. And at the time, I was a single mom of a 9-year-old little girl. And I had no family network close by. My family was 5 hours away, and I had to find a way to make this work. It took me over a year and a half till I could work again. I decided to, as my therapy, I enrolled in my master's degree and started figuring out how I could make scholarly writing a part of my new brain. I had to relearn everything I knew before and relearn my trade. And I ended up, I couldn't punch a clock anymore. I wasn't able to do that at the government um, expectation because if I was overstimulated, I needed to be able to stop. So the only answer that I created was, oh, well, then I guess I'll have to start my own business. So I did, and BGL was born. And I've now been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years. And here I am through COVID and everything, still standing. I'm very proud
Fantastic.
of that.
Bold growth and leadership.
That's right.
Fantastic. So that is an amazing story. So congratulations. I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but that's amazing. It's an
Thank,
amazing story.
thank you. Yeah,
Tell
it
me
is.
tell me about whether I should be a facilitator or a fire starter. What does that
Oh
mean?
my. Well, here's the thing. Everybody that has ever been to a training knows the difference if somebody is a fire starter or not. The difference between just a regular facilitator, a trainer, a speaker, and a fire starter is how they make you feel. One of the things that I have learned over time, and especially when I started diving into servant leadership and things of this nature, and I was learning about how to make behavior change stick, I learned that the only way that we will keep the things that we're learning is if they make us feel. So, for instance, if I think many of us have had the experience, if you're driving home from work and you get all the way home and you realize you have no idea how you got there. You don't remember? Did you stop at the red light? I hope I stopped at the red light. Did I go this way? I don't remember going by so and so's house. We just like transport ourselves. Our brain is no longer taking in or creating memories of any of those experiences because it's so mundane. But if, on the other hand, on the way home, we have a car accident or we hit a deer or we whatever, something happens that makes us feel, that spot in time is never ever the same and we never ever forget. And being a fire starter is the same thing. When we can, from the front of the room, learn how to be vulnerable, when we can learn how to have humility, when we can learn how to love, and I mean that, love, just like you answer the phone, Kristal, how can I serve you? I sign every email, love relentlessly. I sign every book, love relentlessly, Kristal. How can you love them from the front of the room? And how can you make people feel so that this is something that they never, ever forget? That's what being a fire starter is all about.
That word love that's a heavy word that
Yeah, it
some
is.
people may hear that and they may kind of poo-poo the idea. What do you say to those folks who are like, "Love? Really? Come on, Crystal."
Dwayne, it's so funny. One of the things that has been said to me many, many times over the last 20 years is, Crystal, have you ever thought about how that might make people feel? Don't you think that could be a little off putting? Have you ever considered that, Crystal? And it's like, oh no, I never ever realized that maybe, right? But that's the whole point. That's fire starting right from the email. Like, I am already making you feel. And maybe it might be a little bit of discomfort. And that's okay because those are the things that create the experiences that don't leave us. I'll never forget when I first started my program, I actually got called into the governor's office. And the governor's office said to me, Crystal, this love stuff and this service stuff and this book about the servant, I'm pretty sure that you are blending church and state. You can't do that.
What?
And yeah, they're like, how are you getting away with this? How are you getting away with this? And I said, because it works. I mean, it's a
'Cause it's
very
effective.
short answer because it works. And people need love. And I'm very clear once we spend time together, because the hope is using that heavy love word will at least make people go, ew, or why? And say that, right? And we address it. Well, that's really interesting because is love always a feeling? In our English language, we only have one word that really describes what this is that we're talking about. And when I talk to leaders, managers, supervisors, I'm like, all right, listen, if for you, you have to substitute respect or service, I'm okay with it. But for me, it's love. How can I love them? Love the action. And I tell people all the time, listen, I don't care if you like your people. Doesn't matter to me at all. You don't have to like them, but you will love them. And that's non negotiable.
You mentioned earlier that in order to transfer from the classroom to the field, they have to have an emotional tie to it. It reminded me of something I'd read in a book on sales, and I think I tend to believe that a lot of training is sales. You're selling new
It is.
ideas, you're
Yes.
selling new ways of doing things, new
Yes.
principles, new values. And this thing said it was talking to salespeople, and it said, "You don't sell a new car, you sell safe travel." You don't sell a cologne, you sell a successful date or whatever. You don't sell an umbrella, you sell dry shirts. And that a lot of that sale, that idea, that vision of what you get from this, there's emotion in that. So is that what you're talking about? Like, look, at the end of the day, when you apply this, your job's going to be so much more fulfilling, so much easier. You're going to get so much more done. At the end of the day, you're going to feel like you accomplished so much. Is that the type of thing you're talking about?
Absolutely. And I mean, whenever I hear you describe it, it takes me right back to Simon Sinek, starting with why. Because that is what it's all about. What
I
is
know
the
I have that
why?
book. I know I have
Oh,
that book.
oh, that book just makes my heart pound. That and my other favorite is Good to Great. I love Good to Great also.
I know
But
I have
anyway,
that one too. Jim
right?
Collins, great book.
Yes, love it. I'm seeing him in a couple days. I'm excited.
Tell him I
Anyway,
said hi.
I will try. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so I absolutely think that's what it's about. And anytime we as learning leaders are creating a message that matters, we must start with motivation. I have an 8-step model for building any training that we do. And this is not necessarily talking, I really believe there's a difference between giving a speech and giving a training. Training, we're trying to train somebody to have a different behavior tomorrow. We're trying to train them to do something differently. We give a speech, that's a whole different ball game where we're trying to motivate and inspire, get people excited about an idea, but we are not able to test in a speech, can they do it? So I think that always start when we build this with that motivation, with the why. What do we want them to be able to do differently tomorrow is the first question. The second question is, what do we have to make sure that they feel in order to do that?
So tell me about the 3 emotional truths that transform learning.
Absolutely. So we dug in to some of those emotional truths in LA when we went to the ATD conference. And the first thing that we talked about was vulnerability. So, as a storyteller, that is oftentimes one of the most important things you can do to create that emotion that's needed for people to connect to a new idea. And in order to do that, we have to be vulnerable ourselves because people can sense when there's not someone's not authentic immediately. And it also allows our folks to be vulnerable about their thoughts and their place in the world as well. When we do that, we create trust. And with that trust, we are then able, and again, I don't even put this out there right at the beginning, but it leads us to a place where we get the opportunity to love them. And in a training room, it can sound really strange that you would get the opportunity to love your participants, but you absolutely do when you build this, when you build your trainings in a way that allow for them to have that vulnerability and that authenticity and the trust that allows them to be loved.
So is it I'm sorry, is it vulnerability
Vulnerability, trust,
and
love.
love? Okay. I'm smiling while you're talking because, it's gonna sound so arrogant, but I love it when I hear someone on the show confirming that what I'm doing is right.
Hey.
So, I'll tell you a story. For years, I taught how to sell X without starting a fight, and the whole idea was that the problem that we're having, whether it's talking about politics or sports or whatever, is I believe we only listen deeply enough to tell the other person why they're an idiot.
Yeah,
And we don't listen to understand. That goes back to Stephen Covey, seek
it
first to
does.
understand, then to
Yes.
be understood. And so the whole thing about it was
Twin
seek
flames here.
first.
I'm
Yeah.
loving this.
So
Go
I
sorry.
would say, look, you have to listen. And I would say when you listen, guess what you're doing? You're building trust. And it would go into that. But I always start my trainings by saying, let me tell you why I'm here. And I ask you why you're here. And then we use that later on. But I tell a story about my son, Silas. And I've been telling this story for almost 10 years now, and there are still times when I'm telling it that I'll catch up. It'll get me. I'll be like, and I couldn't be more vulnerable than at that point where I'm about to cry at the beginning of a training. I'm like,
Yes,
okay, give me a second here. And I think that that brings them in, and that I talked last week about the need to create psychological safety and the need for the trainer to set the example. And when you can
mm,
set the example of vulnerability, you're telling the whole room it's safe, you know.
that's right.
And I'll tell you that training, I did that in a room of 70 people in Colorado,
Mm.
and I people would say, "Hey, can you teach me how to do this training?" I'd be like, "Yeah, but you got to understand, every time I do this, it turns into family therapy every time. So you
Every
better be
time.
prepared for that." And I had a guy in Colorado at the end of it. I mean, it's an hour training on listening and how to have these conversations. And he
Yes.
stands up and he says, "What do you do when they won't listen to you, Dwayne? What do you do when you give them the facts and you give them the figures and you tell them the stories and they just won't listen to you?" And I said, "Friend, we just spent an hour talking about how you're supposed to listen to them." And he dropped his eyes to the floor and he looked up at me. This grown man I'd never met before that day in a room full of strangers. He's got tears in his eyes. And he says, "I haven't talked to my son in 2 years." And that hit me. And we had to change direction there. And, I don't want to get into that. But later on, I'm looking at that and I'm asking myself, what did I do in there to create such a sense of safety that this man could almost cry in front of 75 different people?
That's right.
And I think it was vulnerability, like you
Yeah.
said, and setting that example of vulnerability and then creating that environment of trust where we could love one
Yes.
another enough to become vulnerable ourselves and share stuff like.
Ugh. Yes. Amen is all I can say to that. Amen. Now I have to know. So Silas, what did he do?
I tell a story about Silas digging holes all over the yard. And when he was a kid, he dug holes all over the place. And this is just a story illustrating the dangers of I bring in a dog and like Silas is out digging holes and a dog comes in the yard and there's all this visualization and it brings them in. And I tell them later, I'm like, I didn't tell you. I said, you all saw the dog, right? And they're like, yeah, we saw the dog. And I said, you didn't. Y'all saw a different dog. I didn't tell you what the dog looked like. I said, you've seen this dog before. And I'll go back to audiences years later and they'll say, how's Silas? They,
They remember his name and everything.
Yeah, but and here's what I tell people: they may not remember what you said, but they will. This Maya Angelou. They will remember how you
How
made
you
them
made
feel.
them feel. That's exactly right. And it's really interesting because at my session in LA, um, I had 3 times the number of people enrolled in my session than what it could hold. And people were at the door fighting, wanting to get in. And I wasn't talking about AI. I wasn't talking about new training methods. I wasn't talking about how to technically and visually wow an audience. I was talking about vulnerability, trust, and love, and how we do that for everybody that's in an audience, regardless of the audience is one or if it's 100. And that's where people wanted to be. That's what people want to know because I don't care what anybody says, that is what changes lives. Period.
I think you're absolutely right. That day in Colorado, remember. Tell me if I'm the only vain one that does this, but when you have a speaking gig, you get the schedule and you look to see who you're up against.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's not just me.
100%.
Not
No.
just me. So I
You
I
have to
looked at
know.
Yeah, I looked at this schedule and I saw who I was up against, and I mean, it was big hitters. I looked at that and I was like, I might have 10 people in there because the other room's full and this was down the hall. I might have. I got there, it was standing room only, and there was still room in the other room, and I thought to myself, "Oh, there's something here." And I think there is a need out there. People are starving for this kind of training, this kind of just being heard, because
Yes.
the way culture is right now, it's just so quick to be nasty to someone, and I think people are tired of that, and they want something better. And I was looking over here at LinkedIn again, and now I understand the heart emoji after your name. So there it is.
That's
I get it
exa
now.
That's right. And now every time people see my name, they see a red heart, and they might not get it here, but I believe they get it here.
Well, had I known that, I would have seen about putting a heart on your, nameplate here, but I don't even know how to do that.
That's
Listen,
totally okay.
we've gotta wrap things up here. If people wanna work with you and with BGL, how can they get in touch with you?
Yes, go to bgleadership.com or Kristal at bgleadership.com. Check out Beautifully Bossy on Amazon, and I will be so excited to hear how I can help you, just like Jim Hunter was for me.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. This
A-
was a real treat. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.